Welcome back, everyone. And for those of you just joining us, welcome, or as we say in Armenian, bari yekak. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Kristina Ayanian, and I'm honored to serve as your host for the 2024 EBRD's inaugural Digital Day happening here at the Tumo Center for Creative Technology in Yerevan, Armenia. We live in an era defined by unprecedented technological advancements, and to me, our gathering represents more than just a conference. It's a testament to our collective commitment to embrace the opportunities and confront the challenges that lie ahead in this digital age. From the intersection of artificial intelligence to cybersecurity, to the imperative of building cyber resilience in both the private and public sectors, our discussions will encompass a wide range of topics aimed at equipping us with the knowledge and tools needed to navigate this complex cybersecurity environment. And as we are a digital day, it only makes sense that we ourselves also went digital. So I invite everyone to join the discussions and submit your questions using the QR code on the screens beside me or by visiting slido.com and entering code 4125824. Once again, you can join the discussions by scanning the QR code on the screens beside me or visiting slido.com and entering code 4125824. And now I would like to invite Ben Crampton, Director of European Government Affairs at Microsoft, where we will be diving into the importance of cloud computing and the intersection of AI and cybersecurity. Ben,
Thank you very much.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben, before we start, can you tell me about your background and how you came to Microsoft?
Yeah, it's an unusual story, I think, even for Microsoft, but I was a diplomat for more than 20 years, working in the Western Balkans, in this part of the world for a bit, and also in East Africa for a long time. So yes, I think Microsoft has a strong government affairs department. They take in quite a few former diplomats, but not necessarily people who've had as quite an exotic career as I had until I joined the company. But yes, it's fascinating, and I think it says something about two things. One is, working as a diplomat, you have to learn things all the time. You're constantly moving, you're meeting new people, you're in new environments. And a tech company is very similar. The technology changes, the subject changes, you have to learn all the time, but it also provides an opportunity, and I think one of the things I'm going to talk about in a second is we've just published our Work Trends Index report, which I think came out 3 or 4 days ago. One of the fascinating things about that is about how people are using AI in the workplace. And I suspect there's a perception that AI is very much a Gen Z activity, that you engage in it if you're young and if you're tech savvy. But actually, what we see in the statistics is that it's everybody across the workforce of all ages. And that's the point about AI. It's the point about the opportunity. It empowers everybody to be more productive in the work that they do at whatever stage of their career they're in.
It's interesting because your background also leads into our discussion because cybersecurity has no borders.
Indeed,
it's
it
global, and it's a global challenge, and it's a global opportunity that we're here to solve. So how does cloud computing play in the landscape of AI and cybersecurity? What role does it play?
Yeah, so I mean, in a way, it perhaps seems strange to be sitting here talking about cloud computing. I was listening to Sunil earlier saying, you know, what's this old guy doing talking about technology? And I feel very much the same situation. And cloud technology and cloud computing seems to be the subject of 2-3 years ago. AI is the subject of today, but you can't have AI without cloud computing. And the requirements of power, the compute power needed to run the systems, the AI systems that we all want to access, they required a cloud platform to run off. But more than that, in our view, there is an opportunity in adopting cloud that comes both from the opportunity of the technology that it offers, but also in terms of the trust element. Now, there's a saying inside Microsoft that Microsoft runs on trust. You trust us to look after your data. And a very big part of that is the security of the cloud environment. It seems self-evident on the face of it that a server in your basement is going to be more secure, but it really is not. Your data is more secure, distributed in the cloud. It is more, we are able to see threats more readily. We are able to respond to threats more readily. That's just Microsoft, it's just any other cloud provider. It is a more secure environment for your data. Any cyber attack, any successful cyber attack on your business or your government platforms reduces trust in your clients, in your business or your service. So it's imperative as businesses that you make sure that your data is as safe as it can possibly be. And in the current environment, that safety is secured in the cloud.
Why do you think some companies are so tied to the legacy systems and, in some senses, opposed to going to cloud?
I mean, it's interesting if you look at cloud adoption across Europe, just to take the example that I'm most familiar with because I work on European government affairs. There is a very clear delineation that goes from northwest to southeast, with decreasing cloud adoption across that geography. Now, what the reasons are behind that, I'm not really sure. I think it would be a great subject of research, perhaps for some of the people on the panel that will follow us. But it's an important question. And of course, the more there is cloud adoption by everybody in this region, by everybody in, say, the Middle East or Southeastern Europe, the more the data centers and the technology and the infrastructure will follow to provide the service that you need. And I think one of the other things to pick out of the Work Trends Index report is as businesses, you may not think you have an AI adoption policy, but it's a fairly safe bet that your employees do. Because one of the findings of the Work Trends Index report is that knowledge workers, about 75% globally, are using some form of AI. If you're not providing that to them systematically as a business or as a company or as a government office, your employees are going to do it anyway. They're going to bring their own AI, whether they run that on their own computers or they're going to run it off their own phones. Now, that brings to them, and again, the statistics are borne out by the Work Trends Index report, huge productivity advantages. Everybody who uses AI in this work environment reports a reduced workload or rather an ability to concentrate more on tasks that are more important. However, using AI that is not supported by your own platform means that potentially your company data or your government data is being used on a platform that is not as secure. So the answer is not to tell your employees not to use AI systems, it's making them more efficient. They're just not sharing it with the rest of the group or they're not sharing it with the company because there's no AI adoption policy. The solution is to provide that AI adoption policy at a company level and provide the tools that they need to make themselves more productive.
And going off of that, what advice do you have for businesses and policymakers who are navigating those challenges of the intersection of cloud computing, AI, and cybersecurity?
So let's start with the policymakers. I think the first point is there's a genuine need to regulate this technology. We as a company have recognized this. We've lent into the need for regulation. We recognize that there are risks with AI. We've built the mitigation of those risks into our own company policy through our principles of responsible AI. But governments need to be careful not to create an environment which creates a fragmented market for AI, prevents companies from adopting one system in one place that they could then use in another because of differential regulatory requirements, differential compliance requirements, et cetera, et cetera. So some degree of coordination between countries in the management of AI regulation is important. I think for businesses, the key point is this, that as I say, your employees are almost certainly using AI anyway. The best thing you can do to help them is to provide a reliable, secure platform to do that on, and the guidance and training necessary to make it successful for them, to give them more productivity, and by extension, therefore, for you, to extend those productivity benefits beyond the individual and to a company level.
And going off of your point, do you think businesses that are incorporating AI early on have a competitive advantage, not just cybersecurity-wise, but just business development-wise?
I mean, we would obviously say yes. It is interesting, one of the findings of the Work Trend Index report, which is sort of buried in the middle of the report and not a headline, is that actually some of the highest degree of AI adoption has been in companies that you wouldn't necessarily expect, like real estate companies, and not in the tech industry itself. So perhaps we're hiding that finding a little bit ourselves. Yeah, I mean, we would argue definitely that AI is going to bring you productivity advantages over time. And also, I think the key point is employees very often notice bottlenecks. They notice inefficiencies in the systems that companies run internally. AI potentially offers the opportunity to notify those inefficiencies and resolve them internally. You get productivity advantages at the individual level, but you get potentially magnified or consolidated business benefits at a company level, and it may open up opportunities that the company hadn't even considered to begin with.
How do you envision a future where cloud computing impacts the intersection of AI and clouds and cybersecurity?
So, I mean, it already has, and I think the next panel will talk about this. Melanie, whom I was chatting to beforehand, and we were talking about this a lot. It has already transformed the cybersecurity environment. Cybersecurity threats are increasing massively. We're seeing both nation-state threats, but also hacker threats and hacktivist threats. Ransomware is hugely on the increase. Statistic that we mentioned in one of our own reports is that the estimated cost of cybersecurity threats in 2025 will be about $10.5 trillion. And that cost, of course, is the financial cost, but there's also the reputational cost, which is in many ways more severe for companies that suffer cyber attacks. So cloud computing, as I said at the beginning, offers huge advantages in terms of the ability of the companies that provide the cloud service to protect their customers from these threats. But more than that, I think we can also assist companies in making their own cybersecurity more efficient. There's an extraordinary high proportion of cyber attacks that can be mitigated by really very simple measures, like having double-factor authentication, strong passwords that are not repeated across different systems, blockages to lateral movement within your systems, and regular patching for software updates. That last one is incredibly important. So we can alert, we can assist in making sure, through a cloud platform, making sure that your own systems are more secure. It makes us, though, into an actor in that international space. It's something that Melanie and I were chatting about before. It comes out very clearly in our digital defense report that we produce annually every year. That increasingly there needs to be a dialogue, a coherent, structured dialogue between governments and companies like ours, where we can notify governments of the threats as we see emerging, and also assist them in designing policies to better mitigate them.
And lastly, where does Microsoft come into play in this evolving ecosystem?
Well, I mean, obviously, we like to think ourselves in the lead. I think genuinely we are in the lead when it comes to the rollout of AI across our services. That includes, coming back to the cybersecurity point, a co-pilot for cybersecurity. We call it Microsoft Security Copilot. Copilot is the name we give to all our AI systems, the whole point being that it is not a replacement. It is there to assist you all and every company to become more efficient, better at managing workloads, threats, et cetera, et cetera. So we see ourselves very much in the lead. We've made major announcements in the last couple of months for huge investments in data centers in France, Germany, and yesterday was France, Germany, and Spain. And there'll be more of those to come. There was also a large investment, co-investment with the Emiratis through G42, which will cover a large part of the EBRD geography in the Middle East. So yeah, I mean, Microsoft, we're very proud to be in the lead. But it takes some responsibility as well. So our sense of responsibility in making sure that the systems that we give to people are secure, our systems are responsible, are ethically driven. These are incredibly important commitments to us as a company.
I'm very familiar with Copilot and an avid user.
Excellent, excellent.
Ben, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your insights and thought leadership.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. And thank you to the EBRD.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I would now like to welcome Jacek Kubas, head of EBRD's Digital Hub, to talk about how EBRD is helping their clients navigate the digital landscape.
Thank you so much, Kristina, and hi again, everyone.
Thank you.
You've heard from Ben about cybersecurity. You've heard about trust, and that's the element where clients of EBRD across 38 markets started coming to us as a bank and discuss. So we took a step back and thought about cybersecurity from two perspectives. One is we started looking into the risk side. So how can we protect our clients, but also our investments in terms of the digital attacks or cyber attacks that can happen and make those companies cyber resilient? And secondly, think a little bit about a different way. We are a bank. We are a development bank. We are here to support you. So how can we support our clients and look at cybersecurity from the opportunity side? We're not going to be a cyber response. We want to prepare our clients through advisory work, through providing different programs to them, in order for those clients to be cyber resilient. If you look at our region and the war in Ukraine, the cyber attacks have increased by around 600%. That's a really big increase. Therefore, we something that we are absolutely proud of, and my colleagues watching in London, especially, I know he's watching it in the office, we set up a cybersecurity resilience program. It's an advisory program that we were able to set up thanks to a number of donors that contributed to that gives us an opportunity to give a timely advice for our clients. For example, thinking about their cybersecurity strategy when we do an investment, to do the advice around that. Thinking about enhanced cybersecurity due diligence, so we are sure the money that we invest and our clients are safe. So that cybersecurity program is picking up very, very well. We have a number of clients in Ukraine, in the ICA and TMT sectors. We have a number of clients in Uzbekistan and other countries now benefiting from this program. So I hope there is more to come around that on the cyber resilience program, and I'm really happy that we're going to have an amazing panel following this little introduction that you will hear more about the importance of cyber and most importantly, importance of trust as well. So thank you very much and hope you're going to enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you, Jacek, and thank you and your team for organizing this digital day. I would now like to invite our cybersecurity panel to the stage. Please join me in welcoming Melanie Garson, Cyber Policy and Tech Geopolitics Lead at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change and Associate Professor at University College London. Roman Sologob, CEO of Information Systems Security Partners. Dimitri Chichlo, CEO and founder of AntSecure. And Vincent Wang, Principal Engineer at CHT Security. This panel is titled Digitization and Risking, How to Build Cyber Resilience. With the emergence of AI and Internet of Things, the cybersecurity landscape is evolving at a rapid pace. AI, in particular, presents a double-edged sword, unlocking the capabilities of both defenders and malicious actors alike. As businesses and individuals and governments navigate this terrain, it is imperative to understand the implications of these emerging trends and develop robust strategies to mitigate risks and build resilience. And we are so excited to have these thought leaders here to join us and share their insights. Let's start broad. What are some of the key cyber threats that organizations across all sectors face, and how can we tackle them? Vincent, we'll start with you.
Okay. I think research already indicate that the social engineering attack might be the most notable attack in the maybe future decade. Okay, and because for example, the phishing attack might be the one kind of social engineering attack that the organization face frequently. Okay, because of the digitalization of the organization, most of the corporate organization will have email system in their daily work. Okay, and a cyber criminal will try to trick your employee to download the malware or store their ID password, and then it might be the first stage of some more advanced attack. Okay, so the organization might need to take some action for this kind of attack. The best strategy is that the organization should to increase the cybersecurity awareness of the employee. Okay, so for doing this, and of course the training for the cybersecurity is important, but also the organization can conduct some kind of so-called social engineering drill. Okay, that will be some kind of platform to simulate phishing attack to the employee, so that you can evaluate the awareness of the employee. Okay, so that will be very useful to increase the awareness of the employee. Okay.
Absolutely. And Melanie, given your background in cyber policy, how have you seen these trends that Vincent discussed really evolve through the years?
Well, first of all, thank you, and it's lovely to be here this afternoon. I think what we've seen, and situating this in sort of the previous discussion of where AI is, power to do incredible good, but is a tool that also accelerates and intensifies every negative process that also happens. So with, there's two aspects that is, one is we digitize more, we've got this massively expanding threat surface. It's like a living, breathing blob that just keeps on growing. And at the same time, we see the acceleration of these tools, so you mentioned social engineering, to become really a lot smarter and a lot more clever, that even detecting these, so where we're getting some really smart business email compromise attacks that are super targeted to, you're coming to Armenia, you might want to go golf because you happen to like golf, and click on here for your 50% off golf, ticket. Things that are becoming much smarter, so it becomes increasingly more difficult to defend. So we have to rethink about how we're creating that baseline stock in the first place.
Roman, in light of that growing use of AI that's both used by cyber attackers and defenders, what are some of the strategies that organizations can implement to really leverage this rapid shift in AI?
Well, hard question. I would say that the first thing, this AI at the moment is a kind of assistance. AI doesn't liberate human being from work. And if we're talking about the adversaries, cyber attack is the methods of implementing a cyber threat. Cyber attack is being launched by humans. So AI is an instrument, should be on duty on the adversary side, on the defender side for sure, as adversary is already weaponized with AI. For instance, phishing attacks. Worldwide, the zero touch, let's say, the point of the cyber attack, the initial vector, is the vulnerability, software vulnerability. Because the vulnerability in software, for instance, in a software used globally, like Microsoft, for instance, opens many doors, right? Now, with the generative models, a language barrier is not a barrier anymore. So anybody can launch a spear phishing attack, having just a bit of intelligence about the employees, about the organization, the context, the national context, and since the payloads, everything is for money. I mean, everything could be purchased on a black market or shadow market. So with the AI, the capabilities of adversaries, they increase. So the capabilities of the defense side should also consider AI to increase the data processing amount, to increase the accuracy. So for sure, using AI is a technical, it's more like a technical aspect because it doesn't change the paradigm. Threat hunting, internal capacities of organizations should be in place in order to be resilient.
Given this, Dimitri, from your perspective, should cybersecurity take priority in a company's overall business strategy?
I will make a lawyer's answer. It depends. If your business is purely selling trust, yes. If, for instance, you're selling digital certificates, which are like passports for IT equipment, if suddenly you're hacked and you're selling fake passports and fake digital certificates, you can close your company, right? So cybersecurity will be embedded in the strategy. Other than that, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think that cybersecurity must be a priority of the strategies. Because when you're in a company, I was board member of a large bank in Ukraine during 4 years. We've been discussing hundreds of different topics. Cybersecurity was one of them. However, I believe that it should be a priority of the risk management strategy today. Because our businesses are almost exclusively digitalized today and live only online, right? I mean, think about, any industry, everything is online today. So if you don't integrate cybersecurity in the risk management strategy, sooner or later you're going to be a victim either of a cyber attack or a structural failure of your own IT systems, which are going to put your IT down and your business down as well.
So how can businesses balance the need for innovation and digital transformation with the imperative of staying ahead of that cybersecurity curve?
Well, the point is that, as I said, you have to think strategically about your IT. It's not only a question of, I'm going to digitalize. Yeah, that's fine. But digitalizing on, let's say, an old IT infrastructure is going to give bad results. I'll give you an example. Suppose you're a company and you have an infrastructure which is like 5 or 10 years old. And the business comes to you and says, well, there is this fintech that we can integrate to our core banking system, and we're going to increase the revenues by, I don't know, 5–10%, because we're going to sell new products. And the IT says, yeah, fine, but we haven't invested in IT for the past 5–10 years. So now we have to upgrade the hardware, we have to upgrade the software, and once we achieve that, once we have invested several hundreds of thousands or millions, and we spend 12 months, then we will be able to produce revenues. So you've been shooting yourself in your feet by not thinking strategically about cybersecurity. Again, it's not only thinking about the external attackers, but what is your internal capacity of ensuring stability, ensuring availability of systems, ensuring sustainability of systems, which must be able to produce financial results, revenues for your companies by having an IT infrastructure which is agile enough to combine this.
It really is the holistic approach.
Yes, yes. It's not, again, it's not only the hackers that are, I mean, when you drive your car, your first risk is yourself. Right? You drive, you're drunk, or you're tired, we are usually the first cause of the car accident, right? So it's exactly that.
Going off of that, Vincent, can you explain the importance of that collaboration between companies, governments, and cybersecurity vendors in this emerging cyber threat space?
Okay, I think in this digital age, it's inevitable to embrace the digital technologies for the organization. But when you adopt the digital system, okay, the cybersecurity will become a matter of the business continuity for the organization. So the organization must be prepared to have some kind of a countermeasure for the cyber attack. Okay, and when doing this, I totally agree that the cybersecurity strategy of the organization should be based on a risk-based prioritization of the strategy. Okay, so that the organization should invest on the countermeasure that for the high-risk cybersecurity threats. Okay, and so and for the government, I think the cybersecurity is a matter of the homeland security, but the government has no way to defend the cybersecurity for the organization. Okay, it's not like the physical security of your homeland, that there will be a border and the military force can help to protect your border. For the cybersecurity, the organization are actually exposed to the internet directly. Okay, so they are facing the cyber attack directly. So what they need is they need help from the cybersecurity vendor to help them to implement some countermeasure in a priority way to do that. Okay, and also the government can have some of the implement some of the national CERT. It is a computer emergency response team for all the ISAC. It's a national ISAC that for the information and analysis team to share the cybersecurity intelligence to the cybersecurity vendor and also the organization to help them to increase their capability to defend the cyber attack. Okay, and also the government can have some regulation to mandate the organization in different sites to have some kind of implement some kind of countermeasure. Okay, and that will driven the market of the cybersecurity, and so that the cybersecurity vendor can have more business opportunity, and they can develop more technology to help the organization to defend the cybersecurity attack. Okay. So I think that is the way that can be done by the cooperation of the government and also the cybersecurity vendor and also the organization themselves.
Going off of your point, there is an implication on the regulation side, on the government regulation side, but cybersecurity is also such a global issue. But nowadays, there are growing divides in the cyberspace with geopolitical blocks. Melanie, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. How do you assess geopolitical implications with cyber threats?
Well, I think it's not just in cyberspace that the world is divided into blocks. The world is divided into blocks. Well, the world is increasingly divided, and we're probably at one of the most unpredictable junctures that we've seen in a long time in international relations because of this convergence of this unraveling of systems as we know it, plus increased access to technologies and the intersection between those two. And I think it's not also, we talk about the state-based or the state-linked players, but we also have this growing group which are sometimes state-linked, or sometimes sort of the geopolitical hacktivists, and you've got the criminality element of it. And each of those sort of entities operate with a slightly different MO within the system. Sometimes they converge and sometimes they don't. And that can create great unpredictability for anybody who's trying to secure, whether that's at the state level, whether that's a small business level. What often happens, and particularly because we're talking a lot about businesses here, small and medium-sized enterprises often end up in the front line of this because they don't either have access to all the tools to secure, or they don't sit, you're bright-eyed, bushy-tailed creating a business, you go headlong into it, and security is sometimes just an obstacle within that picture. And those are the low-hanging fruit for a lot of cyber criminals that are, it's like, why try to rob a bank when you can pickpocket someone? So they become the elements that they pick on. And when we add in some cases, the geopolitical motivations to that, and geopolitical hacktivists or geopolitical movements within this are quite fluid. So if you track things like the hacktivists that were working in Russia-Ukraine context and the hacktivists we've been working with in the Israel-Hamas context, and literally where there's been convergence and movements where they get bored in one and go to the other, and they have sort of almost used this guise of ideology or motivation to sort of do their worst, and will really be quite quixotic at what companies they decide to hit and why. So the impact of this sort of geopolitical sort of unpredictability and disorder is just sort of shaking up the playing field, which is why, going back to, we have to think about what are the unique baseline principles that matter, you need to invest in, or you need to do, irrespective of whether it's a state-based threat, a criminal threat, a geopolitical threat. The rule comes down to, you have to think about, defend against, all the stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to add something on that. So cyberspace has been recognized as the fourth, vector of war by NATO, right? What is very interesting in this case is that there is a huge misbalance between states and corporations. I explain myself. When there's a war that breaks out physically on land, air, sea, the government has the power and the duty to protect the whole country. So they leverage, they have an army, they have defense, they have protection, and they physically defend critical infrastructure, citizens, private companies as well. In cyberspace, the balance is completely disproportionate because you have state actors that wage war on private companies. And in this case, state actors have very powerful tools to attack those companies, whereas the responsibility of defending companies relies exclusively on those companies themselves. They have to defend themselves by their own. There is no vector, state vector that defends companies as a whole. You were mentioning small, medium businesses. They are the ones who are the most targeted because they are the least defended. And in economies, they are, in fact, the blood that is irrigating the economies, right? The small, medium businesses. And when they are targeted, like, NotPetya in Ukraine in 2017, Roman knows exactly what I'm talking about because he was at the forefront in the investigations. 10% of the computers of Ukraine were targeted. Ukraine lost more than 1% of GDP this year. So this is how you can wage a very easy war on economies because the defense relies exclusively on companies.
That's a great segue to Roman. How do you assess trends in cybersecurity in your countries of operation? And what are some of the unique challenges and opportunities that these regions provide in terms of their resilience and preparedness?
Well,
it's a lot.
Yeah, well, it's okay. Countries of operations, they are a lot. Let's start from the motivators for the organizations. Apart from a common sense, there are probably three types of motivators. The nation-state regulations, or intra-territorial regulations, extra-territorial regulations. When we are facing IPO or, I don't know, process data of the European citizens, for instance. But let's put it aside. So nation-state regulations and industry compliance and standards. Banking sector specifically was always commencing 2000s at the edge of these industry and compliance standards, high standards, because banking is about the high trust. And first standards issued by vendors, even like MasterCard and Visa, SWIFT, these standards was, well, it's very instrumental. It's not about building the process, but they emerged in financial sector firsthand. And in every country, you can discover a prominent organization which uses cybersecurity or information security or data protection as its strong side. It's demonstrating that as a business advantage. But in general, the leaders in issuing, or let's say launching with new motivators for the sector is for sure is European Union. It's about PSD2, it's about DORA, which will be implemented, which should be implemented in financial sector by January next year. So these regulations, they make a shift, and they are about cybersecurity, about cooperation, about cyber resilience. Before, we had information security, data protection, and information system security, which is a bit different, because cybersecurity assumes that it's about the withstanding in cyberspace and assuming a compromise 100%. So it's about to identify the adversary inside the organization, rather protecting against cyber attack. It's about the withstanding in cyber attack. So the countries of operations which are not in the EU, the Eastern European countries like Ukraine, Moldova, Caucasus, in financial sector, they have a strong regulator in the face of a national bank or central bank. In Georgia, for instance, they use American NIST CSF, cybersecurity framework, as the foundation for the local standards. In Ukraine, national bank implements ISO 27 series. Currently, they expand into the whole PFSI sector, to the whole financial sector, insurance, financial organizations. The same in Georgia. So, by the way, in Georgia, it's very interesting. As a national bank introduces, or let's say, it enforces to use the automation in fraud detection in online operations. So it's interesting, for instance, aligning with PSD2 regulations, enforce organization to implement two-factor authentication, to authenticate each transaction, to enforce client profiling, but online counter-fraud mechanism, it's, I think, quite progressive. So these states has a good chance to integrate into European Union, having quite a good standards in the industry already. If we are talking about the banks, but banks and financial sector in general, it's very different, because banks, they have a capacity and organizational maturity at enough level, to manage with information protection, to manage information security, cyber security as a process. Whether fintech organization, they are not so, let's say, mature. they are more flexible, their governance is more agile. So for them, but they will be covered again with the regulation as they are a supply chain. So everything is quite balanced, I would say, and the countries of operations they lean to the same framework as now being adopted in the European Union. So that's a good thing.
Vincent, given your experience, what are some of the differentiating factors for effective cybersecurity strategies versus ineffective ones?
Well, as a cybersecurity vendor, we always tell our client that it's impractical to consider to implement some of the countermeasures to eliminate all the cybersecurity risk. Okay, so and also we believe that it's not possible to reduce the cybersecurity risk to zero. Okay. So a good strategy, as I mentioned, that it should be prioritization strategy. Okay. From the point of view of the risk management, cybersecurity risk is a contextual element. The cybersecurity event itself and the possibility, and all the likelihood of such kind of event occurs, and the consequence of impact that will be caused by this kind of cybersecurity event. So there's an equation that the risk is equal to the likelihood multiplied by the impact. Okay, so you can use this kind of risk management to choose what kind of countermeasure you need to implement first. Among the cybersecurity risk, there might be some risk that common for all of the organization, no matter what kind of industry they are in. For example, to understand the cybersecurity risk, you must know that how the cybercriminal attack the organization. Okay, basically they have two ways. The first way is they try to find the vulnerability of your system that exposed to the internet. Okay, and try to exploit the vulnerability to get intrude into your system. And the other way, that might be by using some kind of social engineering attack, for example, email, a phishing email, that try to trick the employee to download some malware. So this kind of attack will be, then your system will connect from the inside to some of the server that controlled by the cyber criminal. Okay, so this kind of the risk might be common for all of the organization, and this kind of threat might be when it happens, it might not cause a big damage to the company, but this kind of attack might be just the first stage that for some kind of advanced attack, such as the APT attack. Okay, so I think from the point of view of the risk management, the organization need to do something about for this kind of risk. For example, to increase the awareness of their employee, and also have to have some kind of so-called ESM. ESM stands for the External Service Attack Management. That this kind of service can help the organization to identify all of the assets that is exposed to the internet and continuous monitoring the vulnerability and provide some of the suggestion for how to implement some of the countermeasures for this kind of vulnerabilities. And for some, there might be a risk less specific for the organization in some kind of industry. Okay, for example, for the high-tech company, the loss of their intellectual property of their research and development, it might be a huge impact to the organization. So for such kind of client, we might suggest them to implement some of the encryption technology to protect their data. Okay.
On that note, what role does employee awareness and training play in the role of really creating that culture, that secure cybersecurity culture within an organization? Roman?
Crucial role. Human element is the weakest, not the weakest link in the chain, but it could be the weakest link in the chain, because our brain has been designed once and forever. Once we can advance our solutions, make our systems better, more protect, let's say we can find vulnerabilities, discover vulnerabilities, we can secure solutions, but we need to secure ourselves. As each employee has legitimate access to the system, it could be misled by the adversary, and that's why, well, employee training and cyber awareness are crucial for business. And the way how to implement it in the company is to burn cybersecurity into the culture, in the corporate culture. Corporate culture is a common things that are shared between all the employees, all the people. It's not a policy, or it's not a directive. It's something that we take and we believe in. So promoting cybersecurity is the crucial element of the culture. It could be used even within the team building, some gaming or whatever. Whatever is good for your culture. And it's always better than any strategy. As Peter Drucker said, culture is strategy for breakfast. So smart employee or aware in cyber risk employee is a part of the security, is a part of the alarming system. An aware employee is a part of the problem. So definitely it's a quick win. It's a huge component to be addressed, and the first thing that should be addressed in the company and continuously addressed.
Melanie, I see you shaking your head. What role can governments play in mitigating these risks?
And I just want to sort of jump on that a little bit, because I think the corporate culture point, I think there's two elements, and it also trickles up to where governments is that this understanding that actually cybersecurity is an opportunity. We often talk about it a lot from the framing of like the risk, but actually where it's a huge opportunity, and to build, whether that's your business or even your country or your state, with that commitment that we are secure, safe to do business in or to do business with, and this is how we adopt our attitude, and that's from the employer at the bottom going upwards to thinking about this is part of our identity of who we are, that we want to be, you know, in fact, we talk about secure by design a lot in relation to the tech, but always secure by design in relation to our vision for our company and our vision for our state and what we want to do for that perspective. And that comes with collaboration from the state level. The biggest problem that anybody will always tell you, and we've alluded to this, is the information reporting problem. And again, that sort of sense, there's still continually that victim shaming of, or that embarrassment of sort of when you've had a cybersecurity mess up, and whether that's at the very individual level, and everybody's done it, and everybody feels stupid, and that sort of, you know, sort of acknowledging that at every level is a problem to that system. So sort of committing to that secure by design vision from the outset for your corporate culture, for your company, for your state, but also that safe space for reporting and that safe space for information sharing. And that applies equally to the smallest country, and it's one of the challenges we have at the national level and international level, and also sectoral levels, to create all these sort of layers or rings of security that go around it. And really thinking about where governments can incentivize those companies that actually commit to these principles and create that space for either sort of, again, rather than, it always gets tension between carrots and sticks. We've seen that in the US with sort of increased reporting requirements, but also where they can support. The UK new regulation on, we forget sometimes about the hardware, about the OT, sort of banning any, you know, devices with one-time passwords that can't be changed. You know, really thinking about what government can do to enable the system to make it easier, because sometimes also passing it down to new graduate from wherever or newly retrained person to be fighting the might of the, you know, whatever state-based cyber capacity is also an unreal sort of sense. So it's finding that space in the middle, but secure by design at every level is an opportunity for competitive advantage.
Dimitri, would you like to add?
Yeah, the question of security by design is very discussed today. What I'm puzzled with in my consulting assignments, of course, I'm talking to IT teams when I'm doing cybersecurity assessments, and I'm puzzled by the low level of awareness of security of IT teams in general. In fact, what happens is that they operate IT infrastructure without thinking about security. So it's exactly like, I mean, I'm not speaking about Boeing because we can go into debate, but imagine say a plane manufacturer that doesn't embed security in their planes. Right? The plane flies, but you don't really know whether it's going to land safely or whether it's going to land at all. Right? So the airline industry doesn't speak about security or safety. They breathe that. It's part of their day-to-day culture. Right? They don't even think to remind that because it's ingrained in everything they do. Same stuff in the, let's say, car manufacturing, right? Interestingly, the planes, again, become extremely safe, but now you can hack, let's say, the flying systems, right? The people who are able to, just by sitting in a plane, to take control of the plane by hacking the systems thanks to the wireless systems. So the industry in general, the IT industry, has still not integrated security by design and security by default. So we are running, I mean, IT is running infrastructure that is structurally unsecure, unsafe. Teams are coding applications that are full of vulnerabilities and backdoors that allow attackers to hack and steal databases and leak data. And that is a huge problem because we're trying to secure that, but it's like running after the train on a permanent basis, right? You issue something, it runs, and then you have security coming, trying to, let's say, to secure, while the IT is already working on a new project which is still unsecure, etc., right? So that, I think it's really part of the problem. And if we going, let's say, a step backwards, it's just not implemented and embedded in training of IT engineers. And I think governments have, and educational systems have to play a crucial role here into embedding that when training IT engineers.
It's amazing. And to wrap our panel before we dive into the Q&A, I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on future outlook. Looking ahead, what developments are you most excited about, and what can organizations do to stay ahead of that curve? Vincent, we'll start with you.
Okay. I would say that the technology developed, what the technology developed, that I will be most excited about, that will be the passwordless authentication. Okay, because in our experience, there are many attacks caused by the account takeover. Okay, so the attacker will try to get some of the information and then maybe try to trick your employee to provide their ID password, and so that they can take over the account. And then the attacker will have a foothold inside of the organization. Okay, so then they can have some lateral movement to try to escalate their privilege to gain some higher privilege account, and then maybe try to plan the ransomware to all of your device. Okay, so when we consider cybersecurity, there always is some human factor inside there. Okay, and mostly the ID password will be the weakest link in your cybersecurity defense. Okay, so fortunately, there are many of the vendors that already support the passwordless authentication by using some kind of two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication. You can remove all of your password from your environment. Okay, so I will suggest that organization can consider to implement this kind of a countermeasure. Okay, so that it will be very beneficial for the organization.
Dimitri?
Well, I just came back from RSA conference in San Francisco last week, which is the largest cybersecurity event in the world. It's more than 40,000 attendees. And this year, AI was on every lips. And I love, this joke about AI. It's just, AI is like teenage sex. Everyone heard about this. Nobody knows how to do this. Everyone thinks that everyone else is practicing it, so everyone claims they're practicing it. Right? It's still not exactly clear what we can do, but as a matter of fact, for some months already, I'm a chief security officer of a company called Before AI, and we are doing prediction of cyber attacks through AI, which is not exactly AI, which is more machine learning, which is leveraging, let's say, the power, the computing powers, and using the models, monitoring the behavior of networks. We are able to predict the occurrence of a cyber attacks on average 3 weeks in advance compared to traditional tools. We had even cases when we were able to predict 9 months in advance. So I think this is the future. Why? Because the IT industry and cybersecurity in general, in companies in general, are very much in a reactive mode today. We are waiting for the cyber attack, and then we just crying and start reacting to what happened. You know, working on the backups and scrambling all the teams to ensure that we are able to go further. So working on the prediction using using AI or machine learning is definitely the future to ensure that it's exactly like working with intelligence agencies who are predicting the occurrence of terrorist attack and who are able to stop them before, right? So this is one of the keys of the future.
Being proactive versus reactive.
Sorry?
Being proactive versus reactive.
Yes, it's proactive security versus, well, proactive mode versus purely reactive mode today.
It's amazing. Roman?
Hard to be number 3, you know. I totally agree on what was said. I think as well that cognitive technologies, let's say deep learning, will be the key technology aspect in the defense system. Each organization has its unique fingerprint, let's say, of the systems and how humans behave in these systems, processes, flows, information flows, etc. So with AI and deep learning, it could be possible to have quite a good ratio of with no false positive, I mean, of the anomaly detection, and AI and cognitive technologies will support this. I am not a big fan of regulations, but I'm always talking about regulations because I'm happy to see that before it was literally a few. Now I see the developments in safe products manufacturing. I see huge developments in cybersecurity and personal data protection. And I see upcoming developments in data protection, because we have different data. We have banking data, we have medical data, we have manufacturing data, Industry 4.0, 5.0, and so on. All organizations are widely exposed. We have external attack surfaces are exposed. I can take a single page document from the website and go to the metadata. I will see who created the document, who printed this document, who edited this document. All this information is in the document itself. I can grasp a message to this person. Even I can grasp a message in Chinese with ChatGPT. And so the liberation of the production is not only works for good, but also for bad people. I mean, so they are very, they can launch cyber attack at a very low cost. But getting back to the regulations, we will see upcoming regulation in the AI. It's a transparency, it's about the internal algorithms, about some limitations and boundaries, and I think that this will drive the market. A new emergence threat is using AI and cyberspace for misinformation, for foreign information interference. And this is a risk which in the short term was named as a risk number 2 after the, some ecological risks by the World Economic Forum Global Risk Outlook. So the interaction between, the cyberspace is not just about the system working like machine to machine. It's also how we integrate ourselves into this cyberspace, which information we digest, how this information impacts our lives and our deed, what we're doing, let's say. So in this direction, I suppose to see a new developments as well. Powerful analytics and some prediction and some technologies that will address this issue of misinformation and massive information, misinformation generation.
It's
That's
two-way
sort
street.
of my my future thinking. Thanks.
Melanie?
Yeah, tough act to follow all of that. I mean, I'm a massive tech optimist, so when I think about all the things that I'm excited about, there's a lot there. But I think the key element that I'm most excited about watching, and you know, we sort of touched upon it, is that the real function of AI and AI-enabled processes is to enhance human intelligence and how we get better at creating that interaction, because that's where the magic happens. It's to sort of make that work, and how, particularly from the cyber context, that we're using that better for cooperative structures to really get ahead of the attackers. So whether that's looking at cyber crystal balls, cyber domes that are happening between different countries, whether that's absorbing that with PETs, with privacy-enhancing technologies to really do that, or whether it's for the intelligence sharing, which we're getting on an international level. We've seen the takedown of some really big criminal gangs and sort of hacktivist entities recently, and that's because of that combination of the accelerated access to information that we have through these analytics and applying that human intelligence into it. So really getting better, joining the dots between those, I think is where we should really be sort of aspiring to, and we'll see a lot of change as that happens.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's interesting because it's a topic that not only affects the financial institutions that are here today, not only affects businesses, but it affects all of us in this room, everyone joining virtually, so it touches every one of our lives. Let's dive into the Q&A. Are we ready? And on that note, if the biggest risk is yourself, how can we all smarten up and become more cyber savvy?
May I answer? I think that, so Roman was speaking about regulations. In October this year, you have in the European Union, you have NIS2 coming in force, which is going to force 18 different sectors to be more cyber safe, secure / resilient. Exactly to your point, everyone's speaking about banking, but if you're not securing production of electricity, there is no banking anymore at all, right? And there is nothing that works. And the regulation is going to work like GDPR. So if you're not complying with the regulation, you're going to be fined, etc., etc. But it is going to put a lot of responsibility on the shoulders of executive and non-executive directors. Because from October, don't remember exactly the date, 2024, the directors and non-executive directors, executive, non-executive directors, will be responsible for cybersecurity and cyber resilience of the companies. And the penalties can be up to forbidding them of managing companies if those companies appear not being compliant, especially after a cyber attack. And this will force those, let's say, executive and non-executive to be trained in cybersecurity to understand, or force board of directors to integrate people who are cyber savvy to ensure that there is knowledge that is brought at the top of the company.
Given that we are at a banking conference, how important are cybersecurity service providers for cyber resilience and capacity building for economies?
I mean, it's absolutely critical. I mean, the baseline of any, national security and economic security are inextricably interlinked. So this is, and it has to be, and that's always been the case. We just have an expanded range of, if you want, vulnerabilities within this. So I would say with great capability comes great vulnerability. And so in thinking of where these service providers are providing that, it's difficult to fight a battle on your own. And where do you add into, and it's one of those areas, and I think you alluded to it as well, it's that the people become a little bit about, I have to do this on my own to provide my competitive advantage. In most other situations, you get as much knowledge, about excellence that you can from every single point to make sure that you are truly excellent. And I think cybersecurity is really at that. If you're aiming for excellence, get the very best tools that you can for what you're trying to do, with a very critical eye on what you're trying to do. But at the heart of, a banking sector is at the heart of the beating heart of any economy. And if you want, from a country point of view, to say we are the most secure, safest place to do business in a particular region or the globe, have to bake that into it.
Really staying absorbent and agile.
Yep.
And the last question, how important is cybersecurity for good corporate governance?
For what?
Good corporate governance. Yeah, so I think I partially answered, right? The problem of board of directors is that they often are populated with people who have business experience, but don't have operations / IT / cyber knowledge. And it's always a question of giving the tone at the top. When I was vice chair of Crampton Bank, so it's a large Ukrainian bank with 2,700 employees, we created an operations and digital committee to ensure that those questions would be discussed and would be put at the forefront of our strategy and of the risk management discussions we had. And this proved to be key because the infrastructure I found in 2019 was weak. And we luckily and knowingly prepared the bank to face February 24th, 2022. We suddenly, let's say, implemented the strategy, IT strategy, transformation strategy that was supposed to be implemented in 18 months within like 2 or 3 months, especially with the help of Microsoft, which I publicly thank here again. So it proved to be key to have someone tech / cyber savvy at the board of directors. Otherwise, if you don't get an advocate at these instances, it's going to be difficult for IT or operating guys to be heard let's say, at the top of the company.
So what can governments do to really stimulate this growth of the cybersecurity sector?
Okay, again?
What's the role of governments? What can governments do?
Governments? I can answer, but I think you
Yeah, I think it comes down to, and we're seeing this increasingly in government-level cyber strategies and in pillars of that strategy to both invest in both the investment structures for growing homegrown cybersecurity talent. That goes back to also your cybersecurity talent pipeline, your people. There is a massive shortage of, we're never going to have enough cyber defenders for the threats that we're facing. That's why getting that human-machine teaming bit is critical, but getting that human bit is also critical. And thinking about massive shortage, you talked about it earlier with the fintech, of women and girls into the system. Only 30% of the cyber industry is women and girls, and thinking about, but also stepping back and thinking it's not just about the technologists. A thriving cyber ecosystem is not just about the technologists, and I think it's also about the diversity of people that need to come in. That includes your systems thinkers, that includes, your dreamers that can see problems differently, and that includes the lawyers, and it includes the finance people. It's not just about building, the technical cyber capacity, but also building that whole ecosystem for people that can go on boards of people, and that needs to be part of the talent pipeline for countries' cyber ecosystem to really thrive.
I'd love to dive deeper into that. What is the role of women in cybersecurity, and how has that evolved throughout the years, and where do you hope to see it go?
Um, like all industries, more women in them. I think it's been a slow start, partly because of, the perception that actually it is, so whilst there are technical elements of it, those technical elements aren't necessarily inaccessible. Computer science is taught really, really badly in schools, and also thinking, I have 2 teens in school in England. It's like, I see what they teach in computer science. It's like anybody would not want to do it. So I think it's really opening up that diversity. On the other hand, I teach a cyber course at university level, and suddenly people get into it, understanding that it's the different perspectives can come into it and have value, either in the building of the technology, in the practice of it, in the defending point, at the intelligence sharing, that there's a space for everybody's mind into this system, and particularly that it's actually a massively accessible industry for women. And it's one of those things, the more women role models we can get into the system, the more women will aspire to, do that.
And having you on the panel is an example of that. And I'd also love to dive into the health sector. So the medical sector and the medical information sector is highly confidential. There's 30 years of digitization accumulated to mega data. How can we best protect this confidential data? And I think this goes beyond medical. It can bleed into different sectors.
Well, I think for the organizations in some industry that hold a lot of important data, such as the medical or the financial data, okay. That might need to consider to have some kind of encryption for that of data. And also for the protect personal data, they might also take some kind of tokenization for the data to protect privacy. Okay. So I think this is kind of some of the countermeasures that can be implemented for this matter.
And how will AI make cybersecurity more accessible, particularly to small and medium-sized enterprises? Roman?
Yeah, well, AI can automate some routine. I truly believe that for SME sector, the save is to use the managed service providers instead of nurturing its own capacities in cybersecurity, even though capacities should be in place. Cybersecurity governance should be a part of the overall corporate governance. Management, cybersecurity management, or let's say information security management, it depends, or production management. But I believe that AI will make cybersecurity operations to a certain degree more affordable for the SME segments, and maybe new products will emerge, more cheaper, more accurate. So that's the way how it impacts. I don't think still that there is no scenario. We are not fighting against the Terminator, or what was the name? It's Skynet. AI is about to assist, and it could make a brief. It could make a debrief, but I barely think AI will make a decision in the near future, or AI will attack. So AI-based or AI tools with AI definitely should be more affordable, as well as managed services will be more affordable for smaller organizations. Probably that's the way, yeah.
Going off of that point, how can organizations more effectively harness AI technologies to strengthen their cyber defense?
Let's say in education, just out of my head, on top of my mind. Employee education, simulations, and by the way, simulation is not only phishing simulation, basically how you tackle phishing email. Simulations at all level, disaster recovery simulation, executive level tabletop exercises? Well, because when the organization face cyber attack, everybody goes like, no response plans, no disaster recovery plans, no protocols, no envelope to open and to follow the instruction. And that's the reason why organizations should adopt simulations on a top level, operation drills, on an IT level, let's say, and even user awareness and sufficient simulations from a lower, not a lower level, but for everybody, let's say, supported by cybersecurity as a part of the organization's culture. AI, perfect technology to generate massive content for education, for simulations, for user tests, scenarios.
Amazing. This was a great panel. It's clear that as technology continues to evolve, so do our cybersecurity and risk mitigation strategies. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our panel. Thank you for your thought-provoking questions. I would now like to invite Jürgen Richterich, the first Vice President of EBRD.
I feel really silly now because I wanted to outdo Nubar and do it via an iPad. But my iPad didn't have Wi-Fi connection, so I have to do it like this. Anyhow, I feel probably even more silly because what is the need to introduce actually Nubar? And I asked him when we were walking up here, is there any person here who doesn't know you? And he said, oh yeah, many. And immediately people were running up to him and say, hey, Nubar, how are you doing? Anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be here today. I heard that you had a great day so far, and that you talked from fintech to AI, cybersecurity, and the day is not even over yet. As I said, it's a great honor for me to introduce our star speaker, Dr. Nubar Ayanian. And when Nubar and I spoke a few weeks ago, I thought he might be joining this event virtually. But he is actually here in person. He changed his agenda just for us, just for you. I'm sure most of you know him and his amazing achievement, and he's probably one of the most famous Armenians worldwide, perhaps joined first with Kim Kardashian, Nubar, but I'm sure you heard that before. A very inspiring, pioneering biotech engineer and serial entrepreneur who holds more than 100 patents and who has co-founded more than 70 life science and technology startups as of today. The most famous company, of course, that Nubar founded is Moderna, and which I know you all have heard of, and which is one of the first pioneering labs to develop a vaccine against COVID based on RNA messenger. And it is probably the reason why all of us can be here today, 4 years after COVID, and we are able to fly here and we are able to sit here. So I had the pleasure to hold a virtual Fireside chat with Nubar for EBRD's staff. I think it was back in 2021 during the peak of COVID crisis. And I have to admit, this was one of the most insightful and thought-provoking and also somehow strangely optimistic discussions I have enjoyed during the difficult and probably also unsettling months. It left me and now you probably will remember this, a paranoid optimist. One of the many intriguing concepts used by Nubar during the discussion. You can always be worried about what could go wrong and yet believe that in the long run things will go right. Nubar, with this over to you. Thank you.
All right, well, does this mic work? I don't know if they want to, let's find out if they can get it to work. Whoever's organizing this, can the mic work? Is there an on button?
It's good to see that I'm not the only one with technical problems.
I'm just trying to make you feel better. Okay, here we go. See, that worked. All right, this was all planned. Well, First, thanks everybody. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Jürgen, for the great introduction and the drama leading up to my talk. I usually just go on, but this time I had a band leading the warm-up act. That was quite good. It's wonderful to be here in person. I wanted to be here because it's quite some occasion that EBRD organizes an annual meeting here in Armenia. This is my family's historic motherland, and Armenians all over the world actually want to make sure that this country gets the world's attention, and EBRD being here is a good step in that direction. I should also say hello to Kristina, who I was with not too long ago. I also think it's great that this whole topic is on digital, because ultimately, as you'll see in my talk, I think digital is one of the areas that Armenia could find a disproportionate place in the world stage in, just like chess and like a few other areas where we have fought way above our weight, and I really believe that digital can be that. Let me also thank TUMO, which is a real bastion of digital technology and giving the next generation, even the current generation that's gone through this over the last decade, a great number of practical skills to prepare them for the future that awaits us. So I'm very happy to be here as well. I'm here presenting to you as a member of the global Armenian nation, and more specifically, as one of an estimated 6.5 million hyphenated Armenians. We live in the Armenian diaspora, alongside the 3 million or so Armenians who live in this country. I happen to be an Armenian American, but there are also Armenian Germans, Armenian Canadians, Armenian Russians, etc. And for over 20 years, together with many partners of the other hyphen varieties, I've been actively involved in trying to see how we can actually help Armenia and Armenians to advance in a number of areas, but most recently, as most notably in science and technology, fields that can drive Armenia's prosperity in the future. It's some of the most rewarding work we do with partners, and it's both an honor and a self-assigned obligation. Now, I also have a day job, or as my wife, who's also here with me, Anna, will tell you, is a day and night job. I'm founder and CEO of a company called Flagship Pioneering, a life sciences company that actually creates companies for a living. We've launched more than 100 biotechnology companies over the past 2 decades, the best known, as Jürgen mentioned, being Moderna, an mRNA platform company that in turn became best known for successfully developing an effective COVID-19 vaccine. I hope some of you have experienced it firsthand, or maybe I could say first arm. And I think the reason that's relevant to what we're talking about today is the experience that I got to see firsthand through the journey of going from a handful of scientists back in 2011 to a 7,000-person emerging leader with over 50 different vaccines and drugs under development and an annual R&D budget of $5.5 billion a year. That plus a number of drugs that are now approved or about to be approved and vaccines says what can be done. And while I'm sure as you sit here, you think that can only be done somewhere else, I can assure you that when we started this in Cambridge, Massachusetts, there was no example of that in Cambridge, Massachusetts or anywhere else either. And so these are the kinds of things that technology-based startups can accomplish and what we need to all aspire to. My presence here is simply a connection between you, who are based in Armenia, and that, because I'm no different than any of the rest of you. And the reality is, any more than CEOs of Intel and Microsoft and Google can tell you that they're completely regular people who ended up being involved in doing these kinds of things, that always, whenever I hear it, gives me a sense of confidence and possibility. And I hope you take that away from today's discussion. Now, like the world more broadly, Flagship is also in the middle of what is an AI-based transformation that's going on, which is what I'm going to talk to you mostly about today, given the topic of the conference. And that is to create and optimize AI, ML capabilities and originate new companies around them. My partner, Armin Magurchan, who's here with us today, is leading this group at Flagship. Those of you who are interested in talking with him, Armin, where are you, by the way? There he is. Armin is born and raised in Armenia. I met him first 20 years ago when he was maybe 15 years ago now. I don't want to belie his age. When he was a student in a class that I taught at MIT. And at the time, we decided that we would work together at some point. He came back to Armenia. taught at AUA for a number of years, joined McKinsey, and then came home to Flagship, which I hope is given both of us the chance to build a great set of companies in AI. In the field of drug discovery and biopharmaceuticals, AI will be a major disruptor in a sense that we're basically talking about replacing the current drug discovery process, which succeeds 3 to 4% of the time, to one that will be data-driven, digital model-driven, and one that could eventually become an act of design, not of discovery. And when that happens, and design doesn't mean 100% of the time we can computationally generate new drugs, but even if you could do it 10% of the time, that would increase the productivity of this industry 2-3-fold. And you can imagine the economic impact of that. I want to give you one small example of what we're talking about here. A company named Generate Biomedicines, which we founded about 6 years ago. We asked the question, what if we could train computer models to be able to design a DNA sequence that then in turn can generate a protein of arbitrary function? In other words, any protein that you want that does anything you want it to do, imagine if you could tell a computer to just give the DNA sequence that could do that. Now, any of you who have any biology training will say that that's impossible, that you'd need to know a lot of physics and a lot of very sophisticated things to do that. And it occurred to us, and this is why I want you to use some of your imagination, that if that was the case, if you needed to be a PhD physicist to be able to design proteins, then our cells, which only just receive a piece of DNA to make any proteins they want, would need a manual describing physics and protein forces, and yet our DNA basically just makes proteins in every one of our cells. So what we've realized is that DNA must encode everything you need to know to make any protein you want. And with that idea, we set out to build models to do that. And that company, which I'm proud to also say, since I'm Armenia, was co-founded together with us and an Armenian scientist, again, who was a computational professor at Dartmouth University, Georg Grigoryan, is basically now able to generate DNA sequences that make proteins that can target any aspect of a bad protein, something involved with a disease. We have 2 drugs that are in clinical trials, in human trials today, 8 more that are advancing to clinical trials, and our labs look very different than the typical pharmaceutical labs. They look a little like this. Most of the people we have working are working in front of computers. And that's what the future of science is going to involve. So this is a long way of saying the topics you're discussing today are relevant in every corner of the world, including a corner as esoteric as biotechnology. Now, while every country is different, I suspect that the dreams that we have collectively for Armenia are also applicable to many, many other emerging economies. All of us want to develop a secure, prosperous nation wherever we happen to be living. And the way to get there is to be able to incorporate into our strategy technology advances, in particular today, AI. And above all, we want that expertise, that early mover advantage, as we would call it, to translate into being relevant for the rest of the world. That's what is economically at stake, right? Small countries will, when people wake up in the morning, they don't think of small countries. And when they go to bed, they don't think of small countries, except if they need them. And if they need them for some expertise, then the best way to advance yourself and get yourself on an agenda is that. So this is why we think digital, and in particular AI, will have a big difference. So all of this to say, why don't we just kind of aspire to more? Why don't we aspire to the possibilities? What if we can think about a global hub in AI being here in Armenia? Can we think about bringing up a generation of students who have the wherewithal, not just technically, but aspirationally, and kind of the support system? Again, here in Tumo, they're trying to give that, to dare to be adventurers, to dare to be early adopters of this new capability. And again, before you think that's not for us, it should be done somewhere else, I think you'll see it around you. It is being done, and that's very, very encouraging. Now, as Jürgen said in his introduction, I am a form of optimist. I'm a hyphenated optimist at that. I'm a paranoid optimist, and I've talked about paranoid optimism for the entire 30 years that I've been engaged in this kind of activities. What does paranoid optimism mean? It means toggling back and forth between extreme optimism and extreme doubt, self-doubt. It's like the scenes in action movies when someone's driving a car at a high speed through a crowded city while being chased. You go back and forth between the accelerator and the brake, and you're constantly trying to change direction. That's the nature of paranoid optimism. And that's how you both move ahead, but also avoid major dangers by constantly checking your assumptions. In an age that we live in, of the kind of uncertainties that we face, economic, geopolitical, technological, societal, everywhere you look, you have uncertainty these days. I think that's what you need. You need to have a mindset of paranoid optimism. Now, let's think about why optimism. There are many reasons to think about optimism. The Economist recently talked about AI as holding tantalizing promise for the emerging world. And it's just one of the many pieces that have been written thinking about how could AI be a reason for hope and optimism in emerging countries. And you've read all this and you've heard about it at this conference, so I'm going to skip a little bit ahead. Think about what big tech is doing with AI. Companies as passé as Microsoft and IBM, and I mean, truly, Microsoft are good friends of ours. Google, which kind of thought it had kind of reached its plateau with search and was looking for eyeglasses and other ways to generate business, suddenly with AI, that top has been lifted completely. Every one of those companies have become drastically transformed. And if that's happening, then we have to think about how do we get in on that action. It's also making a big difference in healthcare, as you're probably hearing about it, and above all, as you heard in the past panel on education. There's students that are able to get, for example, one-on-one tutoring and support from a chatbot teacher alongside the other education that they're receiving. Or an untrained primary health care worker being able to offer better diagnostics subject to supervision from a more scarce resource of highly trained doctors. These are things that are going to change where decisions are made, how decisions are made, who's held accountable. You know, you should be preparing yourself for this, whether you're in Armenia or in Brussels or anywhere in the world, and it's great to be living at a time when this is happening. Yet, while all this is more than, and even more is possible, none of it is guaranteed. I've thought a lot about the future. I talk a lot about the future. A good description of the future is an orphan. Sometimes small countries like this also feel like orphans. It can remain an orphan, or many of you in the room can kind of say, hey, let's own and build that future. Let's commit everything we have in a place like in Armenia to actually create the future that we want. So that owned future is something that I want to talk to you a little bit more about. Now, if we want to create the future that we want, then how do you go about doing that? And I'm going to talk to you a little bit. You're probably saying, how does this relate to digital? Well, hopefully we'll bring all this back together. There's two things that I believe you need to venture into an unforeseen future. One is faith, and the other is imagination. You might think that a scientist engineer wouldn't be here talking to you about faith. And let me kind of explain to you what I mean. There's a famous quote that I like from an Irish author, George Bernard Shaw, that says, imagination is the beginning of creation. You imagine what you desire, you will what you imagine, and at last you create what you will. And this type of future-back thinking, this type of first saying, what can I believe could exist that could transform an area, and then working backwards, that requires a massive amount of faith, because you don't have facts to support what you're planning to do. Faith, by the way, if you look up in the English dictionary, it means exactly that. It means belief without facts. Now, in science and engineering, we're taught to only believe things around which we have facts. In politics, not so much, but in certainly those areas, it's all fact-driven. In economics, it's very fact-driven. And I'm going to argue too much fact-driven. Now, faith is usually associated with religion, but what I'm talking to you about, faith transcends the religious meaning of it. Now, here's an interesting fact you may not know, talking about facts. Science, in my view, starts and ends with faith, right? What is a hypothesis? Those of you who have done science in their lives. A hypothesis is a belief in something that has not yet been tested, that could be a discovery, could be a new solution. That's faith. until you do the experiment. You do the experiment and you see actually if that hypothesis is falsified or it's not. If it's not falsified, it's considered a new fact. And now you don't need faith anymore, you just have belief based on the fact. That's called science. And the next thing you do is you now want to make another discovery. So what do? You go back to faith. You make up a new hypothesis, something that is not based in fact. So I bet most of you who took science classes didn't realize, I really mean this seriously, that all you're doing in science is practicing faith with intermittent reduction to practice. You know the expression in the past, trust but verify? That's all it is, faith but verify. And so when you think about AI in that context, you might say, what does this have to do with AI? And when you think about Armenia in that context, I think you'll find some parallels. What we do in this country has to use a certain modicum of faith. That is a belief that something can be done here, and then experimental verification only to try bigger things. So here's my hypothesis. I think the biggest thing we can do in this country today to advance the possibilities along this dimension is to invest heavily in STEM education. You're seeing examples of this in the after-school programs TUMO does. And in my case, together with colleagues, we are working in this area through a foundation called the Armenian Science and Technology Foundation, FAST. Over the past 6.5 years, it's emerged as a catalytic driver for scientific advancement and technological innovation in this country. And among the many successes that we count in trying to bring new things in this country has been an angel network of investors in early, very early idea companies, as well as in biotech through prototyping labs. But our most ambitious goal, and I want to make sure you're aware of it so that you can kind of potentially down the line join, is to transform IDEA into a science-driven, innovative country by 2041. To lay the groundwork for the next flagship pioneering, or why not, the next NVIDIA, or the Microsoft, or the Apple, to be here, and on and on. It's a grand aspiration. I'm sure you have very little faith in that being a possibility as we sit here today. Now, historically, Armenia, we know, has held a position of being a center for this kind of optimism and hopeful thinking in the computing sector. The notion of an Armenian Silicon Valley has been bandied around. But what we're trying to do within our means, within this foundation of FAST, is to start introducing a series of AI programs in schools, in high schools, and we're hoping, together with places like TUMO and many others, this future can be achieved. And just like oil, which many of you have heard, is a natural resource behind many of the successful countries, they do act like companies sometimes. For a country like Armenia, one of the best ways to grow without those natural resources will be the human mind. And I will tell you categorically, in my life, nothing has been a prosthesis for the human mind the way AI is. Nothing. So you need to get yourself kind of prepared for the possibility that what you'll do as a single human mind is being amplified dramatically. And if you're competitive, you should realize that either you work on that hybrid or your competitors will, or your neighbor will, or the person you want to beat will. So you're not going to have the luxury of easily working in isolation from this capability, at least from my view. So we used to think 20 years ago that being digital native is a big deal. And that became popular, obviously, with the whole internet boom following personal computers and mobile phones, etc. Today, we need to create a generation of AI natives. And like digital before them, these are young people who didn't know the world before AI existed in the form that it's existing. And we're going to make lots of mistakes. If you're a parent, you're going to worry that your kids aren't going to really learn real things because they're only going to learn things that AI taught them. Reality is that AI will teach them many, many things better than they're going to learn any other way. And rather than having them surf the internet looking for knowledge, having the system actually work on training them individually will be an important complement. Now, this forum's theme is delivering impact together, and that resonates, particularly the word together. I think that no single person, no matter how AI enabled, is going to be able to do this. We need to prepare AI natives, but then we need to get people to really learn the art of collaboration, the art of being in ecosystems, and the power that will come from that. Now, to just close, I think that a lot is being said about this in the world. They're calling this kind of the fifth industrial revolution, where AI is not just going to be an assistant, but it's going to be a true collaborative partner. It's going to fuel new ideas. better strategies, breakthroughs, outright. I don't know how much you realize this, but as we speak, there are big debates going on in the US Patent Office about whether an AI could invent things, whether an AI could own patents. The most recent findings is that the patent system will not allow AI to invent things or own them. But then people realized that it's going to, whether we like it or not. And so then they said, okay, we need to have a human materially involved in the process for it to count as an invention. Otherwise, everything AI will do will be freely available to the public. And that's going to be a very different economic world that we're going to live in. So these are fundamental questions. The patent system in the US was actually established during the Constitution. AI is in the, patents are in the Constitution. And nothing in those years has challenged the concept of an invention quite the way AI is. Just to give you one example. I'll give you another example, just for you to think about. In the last year, year and a half, what's been said about ChatGPT, I'm sure you hear, is this notion of hallucination, right? So everybody keeps using the word. I had not heard about hallucinations since the 70s, where people used to want to hallucinate and do so even now. But the word hallucination is an interesting word. It's kind of meant to be a derogatory term that says AI makes things up. Well, if you wanted to summarize a book or understand the tax code or write a speech, not like this one, because you could tell that AI didn't write this speech. It's not perfect enough. But if you want to use AI to create, then you want to make mistakes. Humans, what is human creativity? It's just things that are different than what used to be before. And so what is a bug? What is a bug in the software in ChatGPT where it makes hallucinations is a feature if you use it to generate novelty. And we are, in our own labs, using this extensively. We are generating a lot of new hypotheses, a lot of new designs for things, not to create one variant, but a million variants of wrong things, of which a subset might accidentally be better than what existed before. That's just human creativity. You've heard about it as trial and error. You've heard about evolution doing variation selection. Well, AI is a pretty good partner for that. So think of it in that context. Now, we have a choice as a country, just to wrap up, in Armenia, I should say. Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, was recently quoted as lamenting the fact that his birthland, India, failed to participate in the first industrial revolution, the shift from agriculture to factories and manufacturing. And as it was then, as it was in the 18th century, this is the new challenge. Is our countries going to basically watch these revolutions happen, or are they going to jump ahead at whatever the cost is, including some unknowns and uncertainty and fear? And in Armenia, I think this is a real vital moment. Can we take the risk collectively of saying this is our way to economic and global significance or not? That's how serious I think the moment is. Now, in a speech that I gave recently to a diasporan audience, in the context of FAST, I described the country. The country is among the top most educated countries in the world. It ranks, it has several universities in the top 100 in the world. Its per capita GDP is comparable to that of Italy today. It has an extensive network of connections with all sorts of other economies in the world. Dozens of multinational companies are in this country doing R&D and creating infrastructure. It has a vibrant startup culture. There's more than 5,000 people in startups working, and a young generation that's actually getting ready for the next wave of those. And then I asked people to guess what country it is. Well, at the end of this talk, I think you'll know the point I'm making. But let me tell you, when I asked people to guess what country I was describing, because I didn't say the first part in that talk, people guessed Singapore. They'd most often guess Israel. They'd guess Ireland. Some mentioned Croatia. But in fact, what I was trying to do is describe the Armenia I would envision in 2041. That's the 50th anniversary of Armenia's most recent independence and the most recent new chance we had at becoming something collectively. And I think that future is possible. That country is within our reach, our grasp. But the decisions we make today, and a decision not to do something is as important a decision as it is one to do something. The decisions we do or don't do today will condemn those kids to that future. And so I think the responsibility of older people, grown-ups, whatever you want to call yourselves, is to actually make sure that they have a chance at that future. So with that, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nubar. Huh?
Do we have time for questions, or did I use it up? I'm happy if there's time for questions, to take questions, or from this side or that side. I don't know if any of them, if there are questions, happy to take them, if you guys have time. Or criticism, that's also, it's a form of a question in Armenia. Yeah, please. Oh, you need a microphone, apparently. Here you go, you have one here.
Nubar, thank you for the inspiring example. The question is related to the duality you keep in your organization. Scientific rigor and investment rigor. How are you able to balance both with your team?
So it's a good question, and it actually allows me to make one quick point about investment rigor when it comes to uncertainty. One of the things that I didn't mention, but if people are interested, they can go find, I've talked quite a bit about this recently, is when we think about investment, EBRD does a lot of investment. The most fundamental concept of investment is reward and risk, and in particular risk. So most of the time is spent analyzing risk, a little bit of the time analyzing reward, and then you want to evaluate whether the people can actually navigate those to create returns. Now, uncertainty, which is when nothing exists, AI is creating uncertainty because it has no idea what it's going to produce in the end. Uncertainty exceeds risk. It's a concept that I would say transcends risk. Risk is about known estimable probabilities. Uncertainty is about unknown, unestimable probabilities. And yet, the financial world wants to attribute risk and probabilities to uncertainty. And my suggestion to you is that's a disaster. Because what you'll think is that uncertainty is by definition extreme low probability of success. Now, the Moderna example that I didn't talk about today is a real counterexample. When we started Moderna, nobody had made a piece of mRNA, stuck it into an animal, and made anything with it in 2010. In 2015, we entered the first human. We were not dealing with high risk. We were dealing with uncertainty. The investment proposition was, can we resolve the uncertainty? Not, can we underwrite the risk? The reason for that is that we believe that within uncertainty is hidden low risk and high risk opportunities. And if we're the first to resolve the uncertainty, we'll be the first ones to grab the rewards because we'll be the first ones to see them. That's what happened. So the reason we were in a position in 2020 to make the first vaccine with RNA when the pandemic hit is that we had already made 10 human vaccines and tested them in humans already. Every one of the 10 worked, every one. So when you now in 2020, the pandemic hits, people said this is a highly risky proposition. This has never been used. The answer was in all 10 cases we had used mRNA in human tests, not billions of people, thousands of people, we had shown it. So my point to you is how do you balance the two? Science can address resolving uncertainty that is about the nature of things. The investment has to be commensurate with what you're trying to do. Most people will not touch uncertainty. I'll give you an example, fusion. Today, nuclear fusion is probably the most hopeful future source of renewable green energy. But if you ask somebody, what's the probability it'll be commercial grid-scale electricity, they will say 5%, 2%, 1%. So the investors need 40, 50% rate of return to underwrite fusion. That's a mistake. It might be 50, it might also be 10, depending on what you do in the next few years to resolve the uncertainty. So I don't know if that's what you're asking, but that would be my view on this. Yes, go ahead, if we need a microphone though.
Doesn't work. Okay.
It works, it works.
Hi, Nubar. Great to see you here today. Thank you so much. Inspiring speech. I work for FAST, and I'm building FinTech Armenia. So for Armenia with the ecosystem, agreed we're going to make this a big leading science, technology, and AI hub. But what are your thoughts about making this a biotech hub too, given your amazing background experience in the biotech space?
So I think the biotech has a place in any developing country, in any emerging country. I think that the reliance on basic research and the cadre of scientists who can do this is very heavy in biotech. By the way, the more digital biotech becomes, like the company I described, the more it becomes accessible without, labs that cost millions and hundreds of millions to build. So I think there's a natural challenge in a small country without the resources to compete with countries that literally are spending tens of billions a year doing research. Having said that, I think there can be a place, a foothold in this country in biotech, and we've taken some early steps in that direction, as you know, but it'll take some time, and I think we just have to be realistic. I mean, the only thing worse than not trying is to trying with false hope and then failing. Because then for the next 10 years, nobody puts any money into a project. So I want to be realistic in biotech and say we should first advance in research. We should forge partnerships with hubs around the world. We have many, both non-Armenians and Armenians who care about Armenia who are willing to collaborate with us. Why we had our first Nobel Prize winner last year, a couple of years ago, Arden Pataputian. There are many more behind him, I can assure you. And as we get those people interested in building bridges and adding credibility, this sector can also grow.
Amazing. Thank you.
Last one. Hi.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Me too. We all know that you are doing significant philanthropic work in Armenia. Isn't it now time to do more business in Armenia? What are your plans? Are there any plans to move some of your businesses into Armenia or create new ones here, invest into new ones, or create subsidiaries? Please tell us.
Yeah, so look, I have had some involvement in the economic sector in this country, as you may know, through Amiri Bank, which was a bank I was involved with. My colleagues are here. And I thought that was the most diversified, Western-influenced, professional way I could play in this economy, instead of picking winners and losers, which I must say from where I lived and worked was a very difficult thing for me to foresee. That actually, over many, many years, I'm proud to say that company has emerged as a bank that most people around the world have a lot of respect for what it's been able to do. And I certainly consider that, while I don't consider myself a founder, since I was there from the founding, I consider myself a proud cousin, if not a parent. And so I think that's certainly a good example. There are projects we've looked at and will consider, potentially in the fund side. I think this country would benefit from having funds that can enable scale-up as opposed to just startup. Scale-up, by that I mean the experience, confident capital that can actually take companies that can grow and to help them grow, and not create a lot of companies that eventually then think they're going to figure out how to do this. And I know in talking to a lot of the venture and angel investors here, there's a common understanding that that would be an important thing. And then the third area that we're looking at quite actively is how to create bridges between multinational companies and Armenia. Given the relationships that I have, that we have in the tech sector and in the biotech pharma sector, I think working with large companies to establish hubs here, in which direct investment may be a possibility from people like me, all of those are areas that we're looking at. Look, I think also when you said, how about going from philanthropy to investment? It's investment that is allowing me to do philanthropy, and I think that the balance between the two is important to understand. And my view, and I've been dealing, as you know, here for 20-some years, trying to advise the government whenever they listen to what I have to say, to be very, very careful not to offer investment propositions to business folks from the diaspora if in fact you're not pretty sure it's going to have a return. Otherwise, we're going to have a whole lot of people that are going to be negative ambassadors around the world. And while there's always risk in investing, and people understand that, I just want to make sure that we increase the odds of success through collaboration and through being very careful of the areas we get into. So that's at least my view about this. If you see me careful about what I do, it's because of that. I want to make sure that what I do, the last thing I want, and this may sound strange to this world and it's being streamed, but I'll tell you anyway, the last thing I want is for me to do something here just for the sake of checking the box and have it fail visibly and have people conclude, well, if he can't do this, what am I doing this? That's the last thing I want to do. Now, that makes me cautious, but like I said in my talk, I'm a paranoid optimist. At the end of the day, the optimism will win out, but my caution is meant for the collective benefit, not for my own investment returns. That's maybe what I would say. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nubad. Thank you for everything you do for Armenia, for all of us, the rest of the world. I thought it was really interesting in Nubad's speech. He really mentioned that intersection between innovation, entrepreneurship, and also societal impact. And we're seeing the next generation here at the TUMO Center, the next generation of innovators, entrepreneurs. So thank you all for joining us. That concludes our cybersecurity session. Thank you for your insightful questions. Thank you to the high impact team, the production crew, the EBRD team, to our sponsor, Akba Bank, for making this all possible. And for everyone joining digitally, how about a nice big wave from everyone in person?